Welcome back to Immortals Wing Chun. Seafood Devon Fan here, and today we're going to be building your foundation, your structure in Wing Chun, so that everything that you do after that has power and meaning to it. I know for a lot of you, probably especially when you're first starting, you're excited to get to those hand techniques. So if you've watched Bruce Lee movies, his original style is Wing Chun, or Ip Man as it's called if you're searching for it on Netflix. If you watch those movies, you're kind of saying, okay, what I'm really interested in, I want to learn some hand techniques and kind of develop my speed. So that stuff's exciting. That's all part of Wing Chun. However, the way we're going to work on this is very similar, starting from scratch, as if you're building a structure or thinking of yourself as kind of building a house from the ground up. So when you're building a house, the first thing that you focus on, before you do anything else, you have to lay a foundation and make sure that you're building on steady ground, that everything is solid first. Then you're starting to build the kind of most essential things, like the walls, the doorways, window frames, that kind of thing. Okay, so Kung Fu is no different. We have to start with the foundation. Before you get to, if you think of the hand techniques, are kind of like crown molding, things like that. Okay, that doesn't come, I'm not an architect, that doesn't come until much later, until you have your basic structure, everything else laid out, and the groundwork laid out beforehand. That's what we're doing today. So I'm going to introduce you to the basic stance in Wing Chun, kind of how to get there. The basic stance, and I'll take you through the steps that we first learn, before you learn the first form, kind of get into that stance. And we're going to start with kind of the legs portion of it, but you'll see how everything kind of connects from there. So, what I'm going to have you do, and just so you know, the way I'm teaching this to you is exactly the way I was taught. So my school originally, under Seafood Trenton Haggard, was from the Wong Q lineage. So Wong Q was a student of Ip Man, and then Wong Q taught Dr. Ko. So Dr. Ko taught my Seafood taught me this way. So there's every different lineage in Wing Chun. You see there are many different lineages, has kind of slight differences here. But this is the way I was taught. This is the structure I built upon. And I think, especially for the leg portion of it, you're going to find it has a lot of rooting and a lot of power to it. So how I'm going to have you stand before you start is you stand how you would naturally stand. Okay? So this right away we're talking about a big difference here, because in a lot of other Wing Chun lineages I've seen people start with their feet together, but that leads to a stance that's too narrow. Okay, so also no one stands naturally with their feet stuck together. You do that, you'll feel right away it's unnatural. Okay, so I'm gonna have you stand the way you normally stand. So just stand comfortably with your legs the way you normally put them. I'm gonna back up a little bit so you can see my feet. See, my feet are underneath me. This is how I normally stand. Okay, so from here you're gonna turn using your hips. You're gonna flex your hips. Turn your toes out once. So again, we're starting from our natural stance here, standing up upright. Turn your toes out once. From here, again, from your hips, you're going to turn your heels out once. Okay? That's going to put your feet so that they're slightly, you can see my toes, I'm hoping, are slightly pointing inwards. Okay? The way to conceptualize that is as if there's a point in front of you, we're actually creating an imaginary triangle. The shape of a triangle, so that my toes are pointing to a point in front of me. Okay? At this point, the next part we're going to try to do is you're going to bend your knees naturally, almost like so it would have a spring in it. Okay? So don't force yourself down, but just let your knees bend. You're going to sink into your stance. As you do so, then your pelvis is going to tilt forward slightly, so not exaggerated, but you're settling into your stance here. If you do that correctly, so instead of pushing yourself back, you're settling down naturally into your stance here. Okay? So this position here, in Wing Chun, it's a very fundamental, important position. It's called Yi Ji Kim Yung Ma. Yi Ji Kim Yung Ma, basically, it translates into the character 2 goat holding stance. So I'll pause right there because I know I lost probably half my students at the goat holding stance. That's okay, thanks for coming out. For the rest of you, the reason it's called that is because it helps you understand the concept here of this, where the strength and the structure come from. Okay, so the yin portion, that more relaxed on the inside, the yang portion, this kind of tension, more tension is on the outside. This structure, what they mean by goat holding stance is if you're a farmer and you're trying to prevent your hold on a goat from him to get away, you actually use your legs to hold on to him. So that's actually where it comes from. Okay, different from, okay, so I also took Hung Gar, but if you see in Shaolin tradition as well, horse stance is something different. Horse stance is a much wider stance. So Wing Chun, this is important to understand. Like some other Southern styles, but Wing Chun is different. It uses a much higher stance, okay, than the traditional low horse stance from the northern systems, okay. So northern systems tend to be much lower. Southern systems tend to be higher. Wing Chun in particular, the focus is on mobility, and for that reason, you're going to see that the stance is higher so that you can move easily from this position, okay. However, so when we're talking about being higher up, so even though my stance is higher here, as opposed to being way down here, I still need to have structure, I need to have strength, I need to be able to absorb impact without losing my root, without falling over, okay? So that's the reason the focus, and this is unique, is on creating that triangle structure. So the reason it's called character 2, if you think about the translation, is actually because in the Chinese character for 2, the shorter line, is 2 lines. Shorter line is on top, the wider line is on the bottom. What that's referring to is the point between, if you were to measure between where my toes, that line there, and my heels, the line with my toes is smaller, the line with my heels is wider, so it creates like a character 2, okay, as a description. So it's help you understand the description of it. The reason I'm creating this triangle structure is because what it does, when you start to understand and you get comfortable with how this stance works, you're going to find that you can develop amazing stability even though I'm not sinking down that far, okay? Even though I'm not going so low. So when you understand the structure and you find your balance with it, you can take huge impacts coming in without getting uprooted, okay? Only though, if you're applying it properly. And that kind of takes a couple different steps. So I'm going to try to walk you through now. Don't worry if you're not getting this all at once. We're going to be returning to this because the stance and your structure has an impact on everything, all the things that are going to follow afterwards. All right? So I already talked about the fact that your toes, back up a little bit, your toes are going to be pointing slightly inward. All right? So that means, again, focus on that point way in front of you where they're coming to an imaginary triangle, if both your toes were pointing at a triangle. For those of you who have already kind of basic understanding of this, I also want you to think about, with my structure, with my stance here, I'm actually directing all of my energy, so it's through my knees, through my hips, through my shoulders, all of my energy is coming forward to that point as well. So what this creates in Wing Chun when we're fighting is it creates a cutting structure, almost like if you think of yourself as a wedge, all right? This structure is like a wedge that is incoming, and it has a way of parting things and cutting through things, okay? Has that way if that's your intention. Your intention makes all those little muscular differences that actually creates that forward wedge so that it's very difficult to uproot you, okay? So I know a lot of people when they first do this as a fighting stance, so obviously, so when we do the Yiji Kimyunga, we're here, you're bending down, your toes out, your heels out here, okay? So no one actually, this is to develop the structure, and we do the forms like the Sunam Tao, Chamkyu, they start in this position. However, you're not using both feet square like that. That's to develop both sides. That's not actually a fighting stance, okay? So fighting stance is going to have that same idea, that same structure, but 1 foot forward is 1 foot backwards, how you normally position yourself, all right? So one thing we're going to focus on now, so you're going to get comfortably into your position. You can try with both feet side, both 1 foot front, whatever more comfortable for you, okay? So starting from the feet, we talked about that position. Your knees also are going to follow the line of your feet. So that means that with my toes pointing slightly inward, my knees also, so that adduction part, so that clamping part, are also focused on slightly forward. As if, you don't have to think about a goat, but as if you're clamping something, okay? With your energy here is that clamping. That's kind of what lets you settle into this stance. The next part of this is with your hips. So many people, I've seen even students, advanced students, when they're working on this piece, they exaggerate the hip, your pelvic shift, and they're putting too much emphasis on the pelvis going forward. It makes them lean back into the stance too much. Okay, that's a mistake. So the reason you're tilting your pelvis slightly is so that you can settle into the stance naturally here, and it's going to align your spine so that this is coming straight up actually in the back. So unlike others, so you're not tucking back here, not tucking your hips back, you're settling down, your pelvis will be tucked slightly forward. So not leaning way back like this, okay? That's going to be a mistake. For a number of different reasons. A lot of people make that mistake, and I've seen when people are using some systems focus on putting all their weight back on the rear leg. Again, honestly, in my opinion, it's going to be a mistake. Okay, I speak from experience with that. So you don't want to have all your weight centered backwards. Why? Because it makes you very unstable. So if you get hit, you're going to end up going back. Okay? So when you're building a structure here, what I want to have you do is you're going to focus on having your weight evenly distributed, not just on both feet, but actually the weight is evenly distributed throughout the length of your foot. So that means that when I'm here and settling into my stance, the pressure on the balls of my foot is the same as the pressure on my heels. So I'm not leaning back on my heels, and for now, because I'm not moving forward here, I'm not putting more weight, I'm not shifting my weight to the balls of my feet either. My feet is going to be, the pressure is going to be even across the board throughout both feet. Both feet are going to be connected to the ground here. Okay? So that's going to be the foundation that we're going to do our movements, develop our movement and our mobility from, is from that place. Okay? So we talked about your knees are pointing slightly in, your toes are pointing slightly inward. My pelvis, my hips are tilted slightly forward just so I can settle down into the stance. Now this next part is really important. Again, a lot of people, even far into Wing Chun, you'll see them that they stretch their stomach out, they're leaning too far back like this, okay? Actually, what I want you to try to focus on is caving in your stomach so that it creates a slight bow here, so that if there's something incoming force, then you can collapse, you can absorb that force. You're not trying to present your stomach as a target so it can get hit, okay? It becomes much more vulnerable when you make this straight, and it also puts your hips too far forward. This I want your pelvis tucked slightly forward, stomach cave in, okay? As we move up, this part is super fundamental, super important. I want you to try to focus on sinking all of your energy down through your shoulders. So let your shoulders relax and drop and sink that energy down. Same thing with your elbows. Let your energy sink down so those are hanging down underneath you. All this should feel sinking, hanging energy, sinking down to the ground. The minute you actually relax and focus on that sinking energy into your shoulders, you're going to find it has an effect on rooting you into the ground. You'll feel more connected to the ground, which is what we're looking for here. Okay, so connected to the floor through your feet. Make sure, I should have told you, make sure you're not wearing something slippery, because then you might slip on the floor. You can wear bare feet for this, or if you have shoes, it doesn't matter. I put feet so you can see my feet more easily on the floor. It's a little bit dark. So you're sinking your energy through your shoulders. This actually makes a huge difference in everything. It's collapsing your shoulders, okay? So I know I had a friend, Alex, who's a fellow Kung Fu brother of mine, who went to China, studied Wing Chun. He's obsessed, that's all he did. He studied Wing Chun for a whole year. They came back. Then we exchanged techniques, played around when he came back, and I said to him, you know, okay, what did you learn this whole year? His whole takeaway, okay, so spare you, his whole thing that he came back with him, revelation year, he said the focus is on collapsing your shoulders down. So, sinking your shoulders. So, and actually, when you start to apply techniques, then you see the difference it makes in your structure. For me, I actually learned from that as well. Okay, so this is sinking energy down here. Your stomach is slightly in, your pelvis is slightly forward, your knees are slightly in, your toes are slightly in. You're sinking, almost like melting all this energy down into the ground. Okay, that's the foundation, the body structure part. Okay, from here, for those of you who've done dance before, or or figure skating, anything like that, this will make some sense to you. You can imagine that there's like a string pulling up on the very crown of your head, so that pulls that energy up, so that becomes, you can pivot from that position, okay? So not head tilted back. So here's one thing. Sometimes, and actually I see it in movies, I think they're doing it so you could see the actor's face or whatever the situation is, okay? But you'll see that people keep their head up straight like this when they're fighting. This has two catastrophic implications. The first one is that, again, when you lift your head up too much like this, it forces your shoulders back where you don't want them to be. Also, it forces your weight back on your heels where you don't want it to be. That's one major problem, okay? The other, more important problem, when you keep your head too much upright like this, all right? I used to do my stance that way. That's how I originally learned it. And the problem with this, if you've ever been punched full force in the face, you'll immediately see the problem. Okay, so for me, I'll take you back so you don't have to experience it. Here I am fighting like this. I was fighting, keeping my head up. Instinctively, there's a saying, protect your head like glass in Wing Chun. So I was trying to keep my head back and my stance was forward. Okay, so anytime you're getting in a fight, you're going to get hit. That's just facts. Okay, so I remember very clearly, first time when I got hit from here with my head, what happens when you get hit here, okay? Your head's gonna look up and all of a sudden, in addition to getting whiplash, you're looking up at the sky. Instinctively, you try to bring your head back down because you realize what a nightmare that is, but by the time you bring your head back down, this person's already hit you again, so again, you're looking up again. Turns into a nightmare, okay? Also, if I had not had a mouth guard in, I would have lost all my teeth that first hit, all right? So what's the opposite of having your head up? Anytime in a fighting scenario, you keep your chin tucked down, okay? This allows a number of different things. Actually makes it easier to protect yourself. More crucially, when you get hit, instead of your head popping back like a cork, you're able to move and absorb some of that impact, and even if I'm being hit, I can still keep my eye on my opponent and know where they are and know where the next hit is coming from. That's number one, okay? Otherwise, honestly, when your head gets hit back like that, you're gonna be seeing double. You're not gonna be seeing anything, okay? So it can easily lead to getting you knocked out doing that. So from here, even though this energy is pulling me up high, this part here is sunk down, shoulder sunk down, my chin is down, okay? So the next part we're gonna bring to is our arm position. Traditionally, in Wing Chun, you have one hand always in Wu Sao, which we're going to learn the hand position's names later, don't worry about it. My elbow is about a fist length away from my body. This hand is like a guarding hand, almost you can think of Wu Sao, it's like a goalie hand, okay? This one is to any force that comes in that makes past my initial guard, then I can either stop here, basically, okay, move back and forth. The other hand will be out in either Tan Sao, Man Sao, some people use Bong Sao, it doesn't matter. This other lead hand out here is this one in front, okay? So this is a traditional Wing Chun stance, and it has a lot of benefits to it. You can see what happens here is I'm protecting my center, meaning it's very difficult for something to come through here. I pretty much have this, I would call this double guard, okay? This center area is double guarded. So that's foundationally is very good. It's worked for hundreds of years. It's very successful applications. Which is where we get into the next kind of part of this, which is where right off the bat, instead of having you practice in the traditional position, I'm going to propose something a little bit different. And again, this comes from experience, okay? So the traditional stance in Wing Chun here works for many hundreds of years. Why? Because you're talking about a system that was developed to fight other people using Kung Fu, and also to focus on a center line principle, to protect your center, because all your vital organs, everything else is here, all right? One thing you'll notice about people when they're fighting Kung Fu is they use a vertical fist, as we do in Wing Chun, okay? So punching through the center like this, punching here. However, one thing I know our forefathers and, you know, our ancestors in Kung Fu would not want us to do would be to continue using a technique. This system is developed to be effective, okay? If something changes in the environment, you need to adapt to it. So if you look back, I don't know how many, any kind of street fighting scenario or self-defense scenario, all right? You're most likely not going to be fighting one of your Kung Fu brothers or sisters, or you shouldn't be if you are, okay? So that means that you're not going to have people actually attacking you using center line, sun character fist punches through the center. It's not going to happen, okay? 99% of the people who are going to be throwing punches are going to be coming from an outside modality here, where they're coming around, whether it's hooks or coming over a Superman punch, whatever. They're outside punches, okay? Even if it's going to be a traditional jab, it still has a sense of coming from through here, not directly through the center, okay? The second part of this is, any situation, if you've ever seen people fighting on the street or involved in where someone attacked on the street yourself, 95% of the attacks are going to be their headhunters. They're going for your face and going for your head. That's just what people do, okay? They're always shooting for your head. Very few people are actually trying to punch you, elbow you in the midsection or stomach. It's not happening, all right? So again, we have a situation here where it's double guarding where the threat is not in modern times, all right? So the way I want to have you practice, the forms are going to be something different when you're actually learning your own stance to get comfortable fighting, is two aspects. The first aspect is, instead of focusing on having your elbows so much to the center, so we have tam sang sao jun, means sinking elbows protect the center. That's true, okay? However, you don't want to have them so much in the center that it leaves you exposed to all these other angles, all right? So for you, I want to have you keep your elbows how you would naturally let them drop down. So almost as if my elbows are going to be hanging under my hands here, hanging that energy here, all right? That's going to put our hands, okay, more to the outside. The reason I want to have my hands more to the outside here is so when those real threats, the actual threats of those punches coming in, it's going to be much, much easier for me to defend. So here, if a punch is coming in from here, it allows me to jump out, so I can jump out, I can strike at the same time, or whatever, all right? Similarly, I'm here. Conceptually, I still have my guarding hand, my Wu Sao hand here. These are going to be moving all the time anyway, so one switches to the other. I still have my call, Man Sao, my asking hand out here in front, okay? Those become very mobile. That's the idea. The last and important reason behind this is that if we're in a situation where something is developing, where someone's going to attack me, okay? Often that comes in a face-to-face scenario. So my instinct is to resolve a conflict, try everything I can do to prevent a fight from happening. Your natural posture, if you're going to do that, where you still can defend yourself, be your hands up and saying, we don't need to do this. Let's sit down and have a conversation. You know, there's no need to take this any further, okay? That's a conciliatory gesture, all right? At the same time, it's also, for me, it's my fighting stance, so even though I'm doing conciliatory gesture, I can still attack from this point. Whereas, if we're having a problem with someone, and all of a sudden I'm doing this, okay, it's very intense. Obviously my intent here is not to resolve the problem. Okay, this guy is wanting to fight me, all right? That's not what the message we're trying to send. We're trying to send a message of peace here, all right? So, those are the basics with the stance. With the next section we're going to do, you come back and join me. We're going to talk about the movement and mobility in Wing Chun, finding your center. Those are the kind of key. There's a lot of secrets in there that we're going to work with. All right? In the meantime, thank you for joining me. So I hope you can practice. We'll come back from a position of strength. All right.